Hi, I'm Maggie. Welcome to Experiments in Crafting. Tonight, I mostly just have project updates for you, and then I can just take whatever questions you guys have. So whatever yarn-related or crochet-related things you guys want to talk about, that's what I'd like to hear about tonight. So I'd like to know what projects you guys are working on and what you've been doing while you've been stuck at home. There's not been a lot of opportunity to do yarn shopping. I've looked around a little bit online, but I really like to touch and feel and you know what I mean, squish my yarn and pick what I like if I can. So I'm missing my yarn shows. I'm hoping that I still get to do the one in August and that one won't be canceled. And that things will be a little bit more normal by late summer. But really I've just been enjoying the time to work on projects at home, and now am getting towards going back to work again. So yeah, it just like I said, I've just been enjoying the time to work on projects and things that I have wanted to work on or yarns that I've wanted to work with that I've now gotten the opportunity to. So, hopefully you guys are all well, and welcome to everybody. There's a handful of people saying hello in the chat. Welcome. Thank you for joining me tonight. And again, if you've got questions and you want to ask them in the live chat, go ahead and put them there, and I will get to them as they pop up. Karen saying that she loves Premiere. Do I like Premiere yarn? Yes, I'm a big fan of Premiere. Probably my favorite from them is DK Colors. I have a couple of Premiere yarn reviews on the channel. This blanket here, which I bring out, feels like once a stream. Actually, I think we went several weeks without me pulling it out, but this blanket here is Premiere DK Colors in teal something. Teal Waves or teal... I'm not sure what the name of it is. Something with teal. One of the things about the listing, and I showed this on a live stream a couple weeks ago, whatever the name of the color is, it looks very green. Like they have the picture of the top of the ball of yarn, and it looks like a really terrible, like, I don't know, sea green. This is actually what you get, is this really intense, beautiful blue and then the gray. And I think this is a really, really, really pretty blanket. And I don't think that the color that Premiere shows on their website looks anything like this at all. But this is an interlocking shell stitch with a really simple border around the edge. And there are tutorials for both the interlocking shell stitch and the tutorial on the channel. I'm trying to think what other Premiere yarns we've reviewed. We've not done the chenilles. Oh, the parfait layers. We've reviewed parfait layers. I really like parfait layers, but it had some technical problems. The balls of yarn were kind of messed up. I don't really know a nicer way to say that. The colors were sort of out of order and sometimes missing colors. So it was supposed to be like a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 pattern. So like red, white, blue, red, white, blue. And it would be like red, white, blue, blue, red, white, or something like that, where it would just be totally mixed up. Or it would just be red, white, blue, white, red. And then you'd be missing the entire, like the middle blue section wouldn't be doubled. It would just be gone. So I don't know. Overall, I really like Premiere. They have a lot of good sales and the yarn seems decent. And generally, if you can catch it on sale, it's a very, very good value. Karen says she's using sweet roll sprinkles in the color apricot sprinkles, and it's so soft. I think I gave sweet roll. I haven't used the sprinkles variety. I don't believe. I don't think these are sprinkles. I just cleared some off the desk. So this is regular sweet roll. And I didn't dislike it, but it didn't wow me. It's soft, it's okay, it's pretty normal acrylic. I thought the DK Colors was like, I don't know, 20 times softer. And I don't even know if you can get the DK Colors from stores anymore, but this is a nice acrylic. I think the DK Colors was like wowed me. So if you really like this, I would be curious to see what you think of the DK Colors. But I know for a while Premiere had the sweet rolls at really, really good prices. So I think it's a good yarn overall. And I think that there's a review for a sweet roll on the channel. So if you dig around, you can see my full review. But I think I made a cowl out of it. I'm pretty sure we recorded it. I could be wrong about that. Let's see. Copper Pot. Have I worked with Bernat blanket yarns? I have. I think that there's reviews for several of the varieties of Bernat blanket on the channel. I don't know if we've ever reviewed regular old Bernat blanket. Not sure, but as far as the Bernat blanket yarns, I do really like them. I think that generally the best way to work with them is to go up a hook size. Otherwise they're a little bit grabby. And I find that I have to make sure that my hands are like good and moisturized if I'm going to work with Bernat blanket yarns, because they have that like microfiber feel to them, and they tend to catch like every little tiny bit of dry skin. And so if you've got like a little hangnail or something, it seems to just grab it like no matter what. So, but I've used Bernat blanket yarns. They seem like they work up pretty well. They always work up very fast, and I always feel like the next project that I do takes forever. But yeah, I've worked with blanket yarns a ton. Just as like a little FYI, Craftsy, which I think is now Blueprint, used to have the absolute like hands down best selection of colors. You could get like colors from Bernat does a weird thing with blanket yarns where they sort of release like a season worth of colors. And so they'll pick sort of like a theme, and then they'll release a whole bunch of colors. So a year or two ago, they released all like berry colors all together. So they had a really dark, deep purple, and like a dark magenta, and a blue, and I think like a lilac, and then like a gray to like accent with it. And they were really pretty. And then the next fall, they released like dark orange, dark like mustard yellow, a hunter green. So like kind of a fall farm type of colors. Like a rust red, I think, was in that set. But if you just need Bernat blanket in like a specific color, sometimes you can't really get it from Joann Fabric or from Michaels, because it's not in that year's theme. And so, one, if you see a color that you really like, you should get it, because they don't release the same colors every year. And two, if you are struggling to find a color, I've found that Craftsy, which like I said, I think is now Blueprint, definitely had the best color selection available. Not necessarily the best prices, but definitely the best color selection. Let's see. As far as the Bernat blanket yarns, probably my like best video as far as like view counts, if that's the way you want to like rate best, is a corner to corner blanket done out of Bernat baby blanket stripes, but could easily be done out of Bernat blanket yarn. So if you look around on the Experiments in Crafting channel, you should be able to find the corner to corner tutorial. And then there's also a related crab stitch tutorial. And both of those are worked in blanket yarn and have kind of like step-by-step instructions on how I made those. You could do a corner to corner with or without stripes. You can also do it like if you prefer any other yarn, you can do it with that. You just choose an appropriately sized hook. And looks like my husband dropped the link to that video in the chat there. Let's see. So far as you've only made water balloons and have a bunch, so trying to decide what to make. I have done pretty much everything out of some variety of Bernat blanket. I think I've made, I've definitely made gigantic stuffed animals. I made 2 giant elephants, and I have most of a giant giraffe done. What else have I made? I've made cowls out of Bernat blanket. It's a little bit stiff for that. Trying to think what else. I've definitely made the baby blanket. I think it's buried in a box, otherwise I'd pull it out. Yeah, I think that Bernat blanket would also make, if you have like a Swiffer and hardwood floors or any sort of like floor cleaner thing, I think you could make pretty good reusable pads for that out of Bernat blanket, like just making a rectangle and then being able to fold it around and like press it into those the little holders that hold it on. Just because it's such a like grabby type of cloth that you could I think it would like dust really well. So you might be able to make like dust rags or like floor cleaner type things too. So lots of ideas. There's tons of ideas on Ravelry. Bernat blankets are super, super popular yarn. So there should be pretty much unlimited options. The only thing I would caution is I would stay away from clothing and like hats. Unless you're going to be doing like a big bulky cowl with like ears or something. It's just not very flexible. And so like you think it'll make a really cool hat, and then it really like it has too much bulk. Like the stitches are so fat, like they have so much depth that instead of sitting close to your head, it like sits out here like a mushroom cap. And there's not really any getting around that because it's just such a like gigantic yarn. All right, let's see. Karen asks, what stitches do I like? I have a hard time when people ask what stitches, because I think in terms of patterns. So in my head, like, even though I do have stitch tutorials, like, don't get me wrong, I definitely understand the idea behind stitches. But I sort of, I like to pick and choose out of patterns, I guess, rather than just thinking about a stitch. And it's actually been, I think, one of the hang-ups for me on being able to design is that I can look at stitch dictionaries, but then actually making a thing from that is more difficult for my brain to get from one to the next. So, as far as just stitches, I like stitches that are packed really tightly, that kind of mimic, well, if we're talking about for blankets, I like stitches that pack really tightly, that sort of mimic knit type blankets. So that interlocking shell one that I just showed you, and I don't see my Granny Spike blanket around. It usually is. I think it's packed away in one of the boxes. But I also have a tutorial for the Granny Spike stitch, which is a super simple stitch. But it's just a really, really dense stitch that just has no holes throughout the whole thing, and it looks really nice. And so as far as blankets go, I really like really dense stitches. When we're talking about shawls, I like really open stitches. So something that's very lacy and open are my go-to for shawls, and that's primarily because you get a lot more size for your money, I guess. I like to do 100-gram shawls when I do like a 100-gram triangle is my favorite type of shawl. And so when I do those, 100 grams is about 450 yards when you're talking fingering weight yarn. And you can get a pretty good shawl out of that, but if it's open and lacy, you get a much bigger shawl. And I like kind of a nice big shawl. I should just do 200-gram shawls and you know, save myself the headache, I guess, of only limiting myself to lacy things. But let's see. Stuffed animals. That blanket's really bulky. You're not sure if it's a 5 or a 6. I'm pretty sure Bernat blanket is a 6. There are varieties of brunette blanket. I think blanket extra and blanket big are 7s, which is sort of a made up category. The scale sort of used to stop at 6, and then they made super giant yarns, and so then they had to just kind of make a arbitrary category that's like beyond normal yarn. You got the little scale up there. So yeah, 6 is where like normal yarn stops, and then it just becomes like crazy nonsense. Let's see. Karen says she gets overwhelmed when she tries to do a project by pattern, has to learn by tutorials. That's perfectly reasonable. A lot of people will only ever use tutorials. A lot of people only like patterns. Some people only like charts. It really just depends on the type of learner you are and where you're at in learning to crochet. My grandma crocheted for years and years, and I think she really only had about a dozen patterns that she ever did. She learned a few, and she just did those over and over again. And so it really is, just dependent on what you like. It's funny because I make videos, but I prefer charts or charts/written patterns. If I'm going to choose something for myself, that's usually what I pick. Mostly because that's how I learned. I learned some from video, but then a lot just by trial and error going through patterns. But again, I'm just not much of a pattern designer yet. I'm learning, but it's more of a hurdle than I would have expected. So, let's see. Karen doesn't like blankets with holes in it. So yeah, if you don't like blankets with holes, I would definitely recommend taking a look at the Granny Spike stitch or at the interlocking shell stitch from my channel. Both of those are really nice, dense, tight stitches with almost no holes. So like this is, again, I had this blanket out a little bit ago, but you can see there really aren't any holes in this blanket if I hold it up. I mean, there are holes because it's crochet, but they're pretty tiny here, especially for crochet blanket, and it just has such a nice, like, I don't know, drape and feel to it. Very, very happy with that blanket. I haven't given it as a present because I really like it. Let's see. Copperpot wants to know if I block everything I make, and if I block hats, do I put them on a head or what? Hats I don't generally block because they're usually, well, there's a couple of reasons I don't generally block hats. Number one, I usually make dense hats with really tight stitches because they're usually for warmth, and so I don't really want to block that open. Number two, my hats are almost always acrylic. I don't know why that is, but I really don't make very many hats out of wool. I've made a few, but I just really haven't made all that many. And I will block acrylic, but it doesn't necessarily give you the same benefit as you would out of wool or cotton or something like that. And I guess if I was going to block like a lacy open hat, then yes, I probably would wet it and pin it to a head. Maybe I would pin it to the ground if I was pretty sure. Well, I say the ground, I mean blocking mats on the ground. I would maybe pin it to blocking mats if I was pretty sure that the shape would work out once I let it up. But you just kind of have to have a feel for it. But yeah, mostly I have not had call for blocking a hat. But again, I don't really do open lacy hats for like decorative wear or, accessory. They're usually pretty dense hats like this one here. Where blocking it really wouldn't gain much. You know what I mean? Like it. Yeah, if you were going to block it, what my husband was saying is you'd have to make it undersized if you were going to block it. So you'd make it a little bit smaller in order to, like, stretch it bigger. Because if you made it the right size and then stretched it, it would, like, be falling off or sagging or something like that. I also don't generally make slouchy hats. I like my hat to fit pretty close. Like, I just don't like them to sag on the back. That's just my personal preference. So I don't usually need to have them be taller or anything like that. So as far as blocking everything, I always block wool shawls. So if I make 100-gram shawl, those always get blocked. The rate at which they get blocked depends on a lot of things, but a lot of times what I'll do is I'll make 3 or 4 things and then block them all at the same time and just spend a couple hours sitting on the floor pinning. Before we had the big flood, apparently I have not blocked anything since the basement flooded. But before we had a big flood in the basement, I had 40 square feet of blocking mat. No, it was more than that. Those are 4 square foot apiece. I had quite a bit of blocking space laid out on the floor. I bought these mats from Harbor Freight, which is like a tool store, and they're anti-fatigue mats, but they make really good, they're just foam tiles that pop together. And so you could leave them on the floor because they're intended to be flooring, but they also make really good blocking mats. So one whole section of our basement was floored like that, and I was able to block a lot all at one time. So, let's see. Oh, the yarn on this is Lion Brand Shimmery, I think. Yeah, I think that's right. It was a yarn that, like, Lion Brand released in, like, 4 colors or something. They had almost no options. It's a really cool yarn. It's the only yarn that I can think of from a big box brand. So, one from a big box store that has this stuff in it called stellina, which is this, like, metallic thread that you can pick out as individual fibers, basically. We're going to try and zoom in here if I hold still. But yeah, so it's got this stellina fiber mixed in. So you can see there's just this little fiber, but it's only that long. Like if I pull to the edge, it's maybe, what, 1.5 inches or something like that. And they're all just mixed in. And if you buy yarn from a indie yarn dyer or like a yarn store, like a local yarn store, a lot of times you'll see glittery yarns made with stellina. But normally when you get yarn from a big box store, they have basically like a single thread wrapped all the way around the yarn. So it'll be like regular yarn, and then wrapped all the way around it will just be a glitter thread. Sometimes it's more integrated into the yarn, sometimes it's less, but it's usually a solid thread all the way through. This was really interesting because it's got the stellina mixed in. I think it's a lot softer that way. I think that the normal glittery yarn, like the one that always comes to mind is Karen's Simply Soft Party. That's got the thread wrapped around it, and I think that's it. Simply Soft is a super, super soft yarn, and I think the Simply Soft Party is very scratchy because of that glitter thread. And I mean, I've used it before. It's fine, and if you like it, that's great, but I just think they kind of ruin Simply Soft a bit by like adding that like little scratchy piece. And if they had mixed it in as fiber, I think it would still be a very, very soft yarn. Yarning with Angela said she puts hats over a plate or a bowl. That's interesting. I don't know that I would have thought to do that, but it makes perfect sense. Let's see. Karen says she loves the glitter in the hat, and we just talked about that. That was the Lion brand Shimmery. And then, do I have a favorite brand of crochet hooks that I like? So I do. I pretty much only use Clover Amour hooks. I have one right here. Yeah. So these are the Clover Amours. They're the colored variety. There's also the Clover Soft Touch, which are flat. I think I have one over here, actually. They're flat and gold. These guys. I don't have one of the wood-handled ones, but so this is the Clover Amour. Oh, sorry, you were probably trying to focus on that. So this one's the Clover Amour. It's the silver guys with the colorful handles. And then these are the Clover Soft Touches, which are the gold ones with these like amber handles. I think theoretically this style is for people who hold their hand like that. And this style is for people who hold their hook like this. I actually like these better, but I hold my hook like this. And actually I hold my hook like this in my right hand. But, I think that's the general idea, is that these are targeted for what you would call a knife grip, and these are targeted for a pencil grip. So, the reason I like these hooks, my husband was asking why I like these ones so much. The reason I like these so much are actually because of this metal right here. I really don't care one way or another about the grip. Like, they're comfortable. Actually, I think that down around here, the way I hold my finger, you can see how tight, like, my pinky finger is around here. And if this were a little bit fatter, it would actually be better. You might have seen me before if you've watched the live stream. I unbox a subscription box called Litherco. And they make a hand-turned hook, and what they've been doing is putting Clover hooks into the hand-turned hooks, which is really nice. And I've learning to get used to those, but I don't have a full set yet. I think I only have 4, maybe 5 of those. So sometimes I have to go back and use these. But something, I think for me, what would be ideal is something between the two. So the hand-turned ones are pretty heavy. Like they're probably about yay big around. And then this is only this big around. So a little bitty here. I think something in between would probably be ideal. But the reason that I go back to these over and over and over again is the slippery metal on here. So there's not really any good way to show you. Like, you can see my fingers sliding up and down, but I could do that on any hook. You really have to work with and feel how this moves through the yarn. It doesn't catch or it doesn't catch or grab or do anything. It's just like the metal is coated in some sort of magic. I don't even know what it's coated in, but it's so slippery and it just kind of glides through your stitches, and you wouldn't think it makes almost any difference how well your hook glides, and it makes just an amazing amount of difference. And I have tried probably most hooks available. It's probably a fair assessment, I think, at this point. I've tried Addie makes hooks. I've tried Furls makes hooks. Furls makes very, very expensive hooks, and they're nice, but they're just not like this. And I've tried a couple different varieties. I've not tried their nicest, highest end ones. Those might be nicer. I've tried a bunch of different Hobby Lobby ones. I'm looking around to see what I've got around me. There's usually like 50 hooks within reach. Yep. I'm gonna drop all my blocking pins. Hold on. Sorry. So these ones are from Knit Picks. They look just like the clovers. So you can see they're basically the same thing. I think that's the hook that matches this one here. But I think you can probably see the difference in the metal. Like, this one is dull, and this one's real shiny. That shiny metal, for whatever reason, is just not as smooth, and, like, it just doesn't glide the same way. And, like, I don't think there, like, you can see any real difference, but something about these clover hooks is just better. And I know theoretically that it's not true, but practically, I think that the silver clovers are actually just a little bit slipperier than the gold ones. They're probably the same, but I like these better. Let's see. Have I ever tried the Hobby Lobby plastic hook? It seems to have a longer hook and like that. I have tried a couple of the Hobby Lobby ones. There's some really pretty ones that have these, like, flowers cut into the sides, and they seem nice and long. They felt really nice in my hand, and I did actually use them for a little while. I always go back to my clovers, but those did seem like very nice hooks, if those are the ones you're talking about. Hobby Lobby has like a dozen different hooks. I really wish I had gotten a full set of these resin ones. Let me see if I can reach my whole hook bucket here. This is the bucket O hooks in the background. So Hobby Lobby made these for a little while, and apparently if you drop them, they shatter. And so they stopped making them, but they look just like the Furls Candy Shop hooks, and I think they're just really pretty. And I wish I'd bought a whole set when I got them, but in between when I bought this and when I went back, they had discontinued and clearanced them out, and I didn't get them, so that's fine. It's not the end of the world. But this is actually a really nice size for my pinky. But again, this plastic just, it grabs more than I'd like it to. This is a Furls hook. It's one of their streamline hooks. It's very, very pretty, but it didn't wow me. Sorry, you can't really see the hook when it's against my shirt. But there's the Furls hook there. It's an F hook. Let's see what else I've got. These are some Hobby Lobby hooks. I actually did try one of these. I don't know how I got it out of here without ruining this. I was gonna do a review of these and never did. These ones I think they still have. No. These are these like weird little ones that have this like design on the bottom. But these are just really basic plastic hooks. They seem nice, but I don't think there's anything like interesting about them other than they're just hooks. What else do I have? This is a Susan Bates hook, which is the other style of throat on a hook. I just have as an example one. Still not as slippery, but it does have a nice little, like, cushioned grip. Tried that one. This is one of the Lither Co. hand-turned ones that does not have a clover hook. And you can tell, again, because the metal's super shiny. And the clover hooks have dull, like, coated metal. I think you can see, if I hold my hand up there, I think you can see it a little bit better there. You can see the clover hook on the top there is kind of dull or matte, and the lower one is shiny. So again, they the Litherco boxes switched out and have started putting clover hooks in the hand turn handles, which is really, really nice. So I have more hooks pretty much all around the house of a lot of different varieties. I was trying to see... there's the Addie one. Addie makes these, like, what we usually refer to as the toothbrush ones around my house. These, like, really swoop-shaped ones. You have to hold your hook in a very specific way for this to be ergonomic. So there's this thumb piece here to kind of, like, hold your thumb back. And then this swoop fits in your hand really nicely. But if you don't hold your hook exactly like this, then they're incredibly painful. Because, like, if you rotate your hook like I do, then this handle doesn't really want to participate in rotating. And it ends up being, like, sideways, and, like, you can see on this side of my grip that it's not, like, sitting right. I just sort of fought with this hook the whole time. It forced me to move my wrist a lot more than I normally do. I don't actually move my wrist all that much. I know that sounds weird, but I do a lot of work with my left hand and less with my my right hand, actually. I just mostly hold my hook and rotate a bit. But this had me moving my wrist a lot more because my hand was fixed. So, yeah, I think that's about it. I mean, I've got, like, tons and tons of hooks. These are some that I bought from eBay for, like, $1. It took 6 months for them to show up from probably China, but again, they were like $1 for the whole set. They're bamboo. I don't like them. I found bamboo to be too grabby, and I don't like the throats on these, so, but they're interesting to have as reference. Yeah, I got all sorts of hooks in here. I've got a whole set of Tunisian hooks, the long kind rather than the kind with the tails. So you can get Tunisian hooks that are just long hooks. Sometimes they're called Afghan hooks. Or you can get the kind that has the tail like a circular knitting needle. Both work, but I've got both. So I don't use these almost at all. Usually if I'm going to do something with Tunisian, I have a few hooks from Knit Picks that are tolerable. I'm always confused as to why Clover hasn't expanded their hook offering a little bit more. They make one of the most popular hooks out there, and they don't offer Tunisian hooks. They don't offer, actually, I don't even think that they make metal knitting needles, which is kind of weird, or like circular knitting needles, but I would bet money that if they made knitting needles out of this material, that they would sell them out almost immediately. I also don't totally know why Clover doesn't offer the big hooks in this slippery metal, because the Clover more plastic large hooks are good, but not like these. So these top out at a 6.5 millimeter, which I think is a K hook, or no, a J hook. The biggest you can get is a 6 millimeter J hook, and then the 6.5 millimeter K hook is the first plastic hook. But once you get past the 6.5, I get substantially less picky on hooks because I don't think that the Clovers are as nice as the metal variety. So, I'm not totally sure why they haven't expanded that, because they make tons and tons and tons of craft stuff. And lots of little weird one-off things, but they haven't expanded any of their, like, offerings. I was going to open these up as long as we're talking about hooks. This is a set of Boy ergonomic hooks. Boy makes probably like one of the most popular. Boy and Susan Bates are like the two super popular ones. These I really wanted to like because they have remember when I was saying like my pinky is too tight. This is the perfect grip size and shape for my hand and my grip type. These hooks just aren't great. They're not bad, and I'm sure there are people who love them, especially because of the shape. They're just not the same slipperiness, and I've tried to ignore it and tried to just use other hooks, and I always gravitate back to my Amores. All right, Karen asked, what projects am I working on now? And that is a good segue into what I'm working on now. I have some project updates for you guys. Real quick, I'm just going to check. AliExpress has Hobby Lobby ones with the flowers. Furls are expensive. Furls are very expensive. They are pretty, but they are expensive. And then... Alright, so what projects am I working on now? So last week, 2 weeks ago, I didn't stream last week. I was just not really feeling up to streaming. And so 2 weeks ago, I showed you guys 2 balls of Madeline Tosh sock mandala yarn. And so 2 weeks ago, it was 2 100-gram balls of yarn, and now it is a 200-gram shawl. This shawl has not been blocked. You can see it's pretty scrunched up still. This is a pattern called From the Ashes by Rachie Newen Designs. For anybody who's watched before, I work up a lot of Rachie's patterns. I really like them. They are paid patterns, but I think they're worth the money. This pattern actually had a chart as well as a written pattern. Not all of them do, but I do always really enjoy when there's a chart. But you can see here, I think we'll probably zoom in. I'm just not sure. There we go. So you can see that this will open up into a pretty lacy pattern. I don't know if I can do this vertical, but, let me try again this way. There. So you can see it's going to open up into a pretty lacy pattern once I get it blocked. So this shawl's done. It worked up really quick, actually. I don't know. What do you think it took me? 4 or 5 days to do this? Maybe not even that much. Maybe 3-4 days. I don't know. Worked up very fast, especially for a 200-gram shawl. And it is exactly like the colors and everything that I wanted. So, I'm very happy with this. It's going to be a pretty big shawl. So, like, even, like, not blocked, it's, like, you can wrap it around and it's pretty cozy. I tend to wear my shawls this way. And so once it's blocked, it'll be nice and open and lacy and will sit really nice, I think. So, but yeah, so that's one of the shawls that I've worked on in the last 2 weeks. And then the other shawl that I've been working on, also by Rachie Newen Designs, is called Moonwake. I've got a couple different yarns going on here. So this speckly pink with lots of other colors mixed in is a yarn by Expression Fiber Arts. And I do not remember what it's called, but I bet the label is somewhere. Maybe the label's over here? No, I don't know where the label is. Kind of thought it was in this basket, but it's not. So this is yarn by Expression Fiber Arts, and then these little accent colors are a set. You can see there's the 5 accent colors: blue, green, gray, kind of like an olivey, springy green, and then pink, which blends in kind of a lot, but will show up more on this end. So this end fades. You've got the pink into the blue, and then blue into green, green into gray. Gray will fade into olive green, and then olive green into pink. And so it'll end on a pink edge on this end over here. So I'm not quite done with this one. It's working up pretty quick. This one was a much more solid pattern, so it's mostly double crochets with like edge increases. And I'm pretty happy with how it's turning out. I'm a little worried that it's a bit undersized for what I was expecting. There were supposed to have been more rows of this pink color, and I just ran short. So I don't know if the pattern called for a slightly finer yarn that just got a little bit further, or if maybe the ball size on the pattern was... Sometimes yarn dyers will do this thing where they'll give you like 114 grams instead of 100. And so maybe it was a case where there was 114 grams instead of 100. But I think it still is going to turn out to be a pretty good size. So the intent here is that you would wear it like this. I probably would need a shawl pin if it stays this size, but it'll get a little bit bigger with blocking. But it's asymmetrical, so it'll be pink along this edge, and it'll still be pink over here, but you've got all the like little hints of color here, and then you'll have the variety of colors on this side. So I think it's going to look really nice. I think it's going to be a pretty nice late spring type of shawl. So if I get it blocked pretty quick, that I should be able to wear it through the rest of April and May and have it look pretty nice. So that's what I've been working on. Fingering weight shawls take a while, especially if you've never worked one up. They do take a bit of time, just because the yarn is fine. And so each stitch that you make just isn't very big. But I really enjoy the intricacy of a really fine shawl. And I haven't done a lot of shawl work recently because I've done a lot more projects for the channel. And so I've taken the last few weeks of stay at home and really worked on some stuff that is different than what I had been working on previously. So that's not to say that I don't have hundreds of shawls already made. Probably not hundreds, but 50s of shawls. I don't know. Certainly tens of shawls made, but I don't think it's quite 100. So that's what I've been working on. And then the last little thing to show is we have a little circular knitter, and I've shown some samples from that. And my husband usually is the one who operates it, and he made a little knit panel. This is the Rockstar Colors yarn from Ice Yarns that I unboxed on one of the streams recently. It worked up pretty, but it's pretty grabby. This is another chainette yarn that is filled, so it's like a knit tube full of fuzz. So you should be able to sort of see, like, maybe. I'll try and zoom in just a little bit more. So you can see there's the knit tube that I'm stretching open there. You can kind of see the chain structure as I open it. And then there's just this fuzz. If I move the ball of yarn, it might be easier to see the fuzz. This fuzz that you can just kind of pick and pick and pick, and it just keeps coming out. The issue is that the fuzz as you are trying to knit it or as you're trying to pull it from the ball, the fuzz wants to interact with itself, and it has a tendency to grab. Like, you can't pull real smooth. And so it's grabby as you're working with it. It grabs onto your skin. I think the grabbiness makes it feel less soft. And not really scratchy, but like less pleasant, because it's not soft and cozy. It's just stuck to your skin. More like getting, hair on you when you're wet. It's just stuck. It's not really pleasant. So I think it worked up really pretty. It might get better with washing. It might lose a little bit of its static with a little bit of fabric softener. So I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt. I'm also going to try crocheting this, but this is just a little knit sample of this yarn, just to sort of see how it works up and see what it, how it was to work with. So initial impressions are not amazing, but I think it has some hope. And I've got this in a bunch of colors, and because of the way you have to order from Ice Yarns, I have a lot of each color. So I think we got it. This is the yarn that we got the most colors of. I think we got 3 colors of Rockstar colors, or 3 colorways of Rockstar colors, and maybe 1 of regular Rockstar, I think, in copper or something like that. So, yeah. Let's see. Karen said I did a beautiful job on that. I'm not sure which shawl she meant, but thank you either way. And it looks really pretty on me. And how long have I been crocheting? 8 years, maybe? Probably less than 10, but more than 7, something like that. I'm not exactly sure. I think actually I joined Ravelry in January 2013, so probably shortly before that is when I started crocheting. Because I think it was a couple months into crocheting that I actually found out about Ravelry. So that's probably a good gauge there. So 7.5-ish years. My grandma crocheted the whole time I was growing up. I'm left-handed, and I tried learning left-handed a couple times as a kid, and without pretty much any success. And so I just kind of gave that up for a long time. And I don't know what got me interested again, but I really just wanted to make some stuff and tried a little harder and actually decided to learn right-handed. So that the tutorials were a lot easier to follow. And I crochet right-handed and have been since I started. And I sort of have a hybrid type of crochet where like I said, I use a lot of my left hand, more than most right-handed people do. If I was a knitter, I think I would be like I think they usually call it throwing. Where you like move your yarn instead of letting your hook do the work. But that's not really a thing in crochet. But yeah, so I guess I do sort of a hybrid, but I definitely hold my hook in my right hand, and that really, I think, is what got me over the hurdle. I am aware that there are left-handed crochet tutorials. They're just much, much fewer and further in between than a right-handed tutorial. So it was just easier to learn that way. And I think more comfortable for me. So, but yeah. So I guess if anyone else has questions or comments or wants to talk about yarn or crochet or tell me what you're working on, you can throw those in the live chat. And I will, get to them as they come through. Karen says that she tried to learn from her grandma, but never completed anything. All she did was make chains and a few rows of single crochet. I think that's mostly what my husband did as a kid, was made long chains. I don't think you actually ever learned to crochet like a single crochet back into them, if I remember correctly. So, Helen says she's a thick yarn that has baby colors in it. I just don't know what to do with it. I wanted to do a round granny. Thick yarn that has baby colors in it. Yeah, I mean, a round granny, well, I guess you don't want to call it a granny square, but yeah, a round granny style stitch should work. I don't know how thick of a yarn it is. Or how much you have. You can do, I like a corner to corner for a thick yarn. I think it works up really quick, and with a thick yarn you get kind of a nice squish to it because it's such a dense stitch. Granny style stitches, you can do hexagons, you can do obviously squares or typical shapes. The only blanket I ever worked that I didn't really care for was a star-shaped blanket, and it turned out really pretty, and the person that I made it for still uses it. They've had a second baby, and they still use it for that baby, and really liked it. But because of the way a star works up, you start really small in the center, and as you go, it gets really out of control really fast. And so by like the 20th round, the lengths of the points on the stars were so long just to make a single round that I was really, really over it. So that was really the only thing that I haven't loved as far as blankets go. Trying to think what else might be fun with thick yarn and baby colors, because you can't really do accessories, so you're kind of limited to a baby blanket. I'm trying to think if you could maybe do a stuffed animal if that's something that you're interested in trying. I've seen a lot of really cute stuffed animals worked up with a very thick yarn recently. Teddy bears and elephants. If it's a variegated colorway, though, it might be a little bit tough to get it to work out the right way. You might end up with like weird spots and stuff, depending on what kind of animal you make. That might not be desirable. Let's see. I found the same issue with the 5-point star, but the Jada and Stitch's 12-point star came out just perfect. That's interesting that a 12-point star is less irritating. I guess it sort of makes sense because on the 5 points, the points have to like protrude further. So your edges are kind of longer, and on a 12-point, they'd be shorter and more like a circle. So that's a interesting observation. I haven't made a 12-point anything. So that would be interesting to try. Maybe I'll give that a shot. I have a couple of people I know that are expecting babies soon, so I probably have some baby blankets to make in pretty short order. So yeah, I think I'm caught up on comments. My eyes are actually surprisingly tired right now, so I'm mentally awake, but my eyes are fighting me right now. It's been pretty bad allergy-wise around here. I don't know what it's like for you guys in other parts of the country or other parts of the world, but allergy-wise, I've been fighting pretty hard. We've had a lot of rain and then a lot of warm temperatures, which is really good pollen, and a lot of wind. It's kicking up a lot of dust. So, I think my eyes are just allergy-y. Let's see, the Secret Yarnery, she made a round granny, but in a regular yarn and it looked good. I've done star blankets. I made one. After that, it seemed like everyone wanted one, so I've done 10 to 12 points with my star blanket. Okay. So with a round blanket, in a regular yarn, if you want to do it out of a larger yarn, you just need a larger hook. And then understand that if there are intricate stitches, which a granny shouldn't really, it should just be clusters of double crochets. I mean, a granny stitch is basically like 3 double crochets and then chains, and then 3 double crochets a little bit over. Like that's the thing that really makes it a granny stitch. But, or actually, I think sometimes there's not even chains. It's just clusters separated, without working the chains. But either way, it should look just fine as long as you pick the right size hook. With a heavy yarn, it's much, much, much better to go with too big of a hook than it is too small of a hook. If you go with too small of a hook, you're going to end up with a blanket that doesn't flex. I have a good example of that. Where's that cowl? I've got it right here. I've brought this out before. This is Lion Brand Thick and Quick Mandala. And you'll notice it's actually gotten a little bit better, but it stands on its own because I just did not use quite a large enough hook for it. So I think I used like a 9mm hook. I probably should have gone 10 or 11. And it would have given it a lot more drape. So what you don't want is this. If you're going to make a baby blanket and you want it to be soft or flexible at all, you want to go with a larger hook and probably even larger than they suggest. I've found that they're a little bit conservative usually with hook size. And there's almost no harm in going like a full millimeter larger. There's usually no harm in going 2mm larger. Your only issue would be that if it's a pattern with lots of chains, your chains will be bigger, which means your holes will be bigger. So you might not necessarily want holes this big in something that you're going to give as a baby blanket. So that would be the only thing I'd be aware of, is you might work a few stitches, and make sure that your gaps aren't too big. But yeah, so that's my only suggestion. Parfait Layers is a yarn that I have worked with in the past. It's not that heavy of a yarn, actually. It looks a lot puffier, but I think it's actually only a 4 or 5. When you actually start pulling the Parfait Layers out of the ball, like, it looks much puffier when it's caked up. Once you actually start pulling it out, you'll notice it's actually on the fine side for a chenille yarn. And I actually, what I just said about a crochet going too large on a crochet hook, I wouldn't go crazy large for Parfait Layers. I think the hook that they recommend, or maybe 0.5 millimeter larger, I think they probably recommend like a K hook, if I remember right. And if that's the case, you could go to trying to remember what's up from a K hook. So 6.5, 7 hook. It's maybe an L hook. I think you can go to an L hook, which is a 7mm or something like that, but I wouldn't go as big as an 8mm on that. Assuming that's not what they recommend. If I remember correctly, I think Parfait Layers, they recommend somewhere in the ballpark of like a J or K hook. But that should work out perfect for a round granny. The only thing to note on the Parfait Layers is just make sure ahead of time, if it's going to matter to your pattern, that your colors are right. I had some bad balls of Parfait Layers where they messed up the color sequence. So you might want to double check that. I thought mine were right, and as I started working, I realized that they had like inverted the colors halfway through. So you can usually fix it by cutting it apart and putting them back in the right order if it matters to you. If it doesn't matter to you, it doesn't matter. Alternatively, I do have a blanket tutorial on parfait layers. Oh, actually, no, I think we didn't do the blanket tutorial. Maybe we did? I think we didn't do the blanket. No, we did. We have a pink blanket tutorial on the channel. We put it off for a really long time because of the issues with the blanket ball, the parfait layers balls. But I think in the video I just talked through the issues. But I do have a tutorial using a single ball of parfait layers. There is a surprising amount of yarn crammed into that one ball, and you can get an entire baby blanket out of one ball. But yeah, parfait layers has beautiful drape to it, so I wouldn't worry at all about using a giant hook. When you get into some of these crazy heavy yarns, like this Mandala Thick and Quick, or like a Bernat blanket or anything like that, it really, you really need to go up a hook size if you want something with a lot of drape. So yeah. Lucy asked if I'm going to have a tutorial for a face mask. I probably will not. And actually, I probably shouldn't say probably. I will not. Crochet's not really the right technique for face masks that are effective. You can line pretty much any type of fabric with something better, but you really are better off just making it out of a better fabric for that purpose. And what I mean by that is the appropriate fabric for a face mask is a non-woven. A non-woven is sort of a like fiber mat. Similar, if you sew, it's similar to interfacing. Interfacing is usually a non-woven. But if you've ever been in the hospital and worn a face mask, you know that fabric is different than other fabrics. So that's the right type of fabric for a face mask. And that's what they make them out of. Generally, they do multiple layers of non-wovens. In lieu of a non-woven, you can use a woven fabric, very, very tightly woven fabric. I think the CDC was recommending like a damask fabric, which is a really tightly woven, or not damask, a batiks. They were recommending batiks from quilting, which are really tight fabric that they use in quilting, and then otherwise just really, really tightly woven fabrics. And that's really it. I've done actually a surprising amount of research into this recently, and those are pretty much the choices that if you want an effective face mask, those are it. You can use knits, you can use whatever you've got around the house, according to many news sources and other sources, but for effective face masks, your choices are very tightly woven or non-wovens. And crochet is not either of those, and so I would not feel comfortable doing a face mask. You certainly can make a crochet face mask and then line it with some sort of filter material, but I personally wouldn't feel comfortable instructing someone on how to make a face mask if I wasn't sure that they weren't going to line it and use it properly. So, that's my, I guess my take on it. So, since I only crochet, and since you couldn't actually knit tight enough to make a face mask, and really you probably can't hand weave tight enough to make a face mask either, then that's probably not a something that I want to personally get into. On the other hand, I have seen crochet face mask like holders or like helpers for primarily for nurses and medical staff, so that they can put them on the back of their head back here and put the loops back on buttons so that the loops of their face masks aren't like digging in behind their ears. Those would be an effective use of crochet that wouldn't have those same concerns, because that's a like helper piece or an accessory, rather than an actual piece trying to do work. Let's see. CZ says, hi, thank you, so fun. Welcome. And Isaiah also says, hi, and so welcome. Thanks for joining. Thank you, everyone who's on there and who's chatting with me and talking. So welcome to all of you, and thanks for joining me. If you have questions and you just joined, please throw them in the comments, or not in the comment section, in the live chat. If you're watching a replay of this later, you can throw them in the comment section. But if you are chatting now, you can put it in the live chat. Have I tried Premiere Rodeo? I have not. I've put it in the cart a couple of times, and I have a really bad habit on Premiere's website of putting tons of stuff into the cart, and then Premiere dumps the entire cart like every so often. I don't know if their website has a little glitch here and there, but I've put it in there a couple times and then not ended up with it. But it's an interesting looking yarn, and one of the really kind of cool things about it is they offer like 4 of the same color. So you can get like purple that's primarily purple, and then purple and white with just a little bit of white, and then purple and white with a little bit more white, and then all white. And so you could do a really cool fade with the yarn. And I've considered doing that a couple of times, and like I said, I get it to the cart, and then Premiere dumps it, and then I forget about it, and then I repeat that process a couple of times. I've only ordered from Premiere maybe 2 or 3 times. So, the end result of that is I'd like to try it, but I have not yet. It's made with recycled cotton? That's interesting. Does it say what percentage? No? Okay, interesting. We should get our hands on some of that. Try it out. So. But yeah, I think it comes in like, what, 4 or 5 colors where you can get the different fades of that option?
It comes in the ends, and then it comes in 2 mixes. So it comes in like a heavy color mix and a light color mix.
Right, but how many primary colors of solids are there?
There's 4 colors.
4 colors and white. Okay. Let's see. Isaiah's asking, can I try Red Heart Super Saver Jumbo? So I've tried Red Heart Super Saver a lot, especially early on in crocheting. Super Saver is good for a lot of projects. It's inexpensive, and it comes in 80 million different colors. One of the really weird things about Red Heart Super Saver is that depending on what color you get, that's slightly nicer or worse yarn. So some colors feel slightly nicer, and some colors feel slightly scratchier and not as nice. But Red Heart Super Saver is, I think, like held as like the most basic and like beginner yarn. Some people will use Red Heart Super Saver for the rest of the time they crochet forever. But it seems to be the yarn that like every single person starts with. Probably because you get so much of it for so little money. But it is it's a pretty basic acrylic yarn. Seems to hold up pretty well from what I have found. It's pretty popular with people who make amigurumi because it comes in so many colors. But there's not a whole lot to say about Red Heart Super Saver other than it is just a standard workhorse type of yarn. Yeah, the jumbo yarn, unless I'm mistaken, jumbo just refers to the size of the package and not like Bernat blanket big where the actual yarn is bigger. The package is just bigger, unless my husband's maybe saying I'm wrong.
Red Heart Super Saver Jumbo.
Is it just a 4 worsted weight?
Well, Red Heart Super Saver Jumbo is, but I'm seeing
Okay.
there is some big Super Saver.
Okay, so
I'm trying to find out what it
I
is.
guess there is a fat, like a higher number. So rather than a worsted weight, some like a jumbo yarn version of Super Saver. But Red Heart Super Saver Jumbo is what I thought it was, which is just a large package of Super Saver, which is usually just better value for the money. Does that say? I'm struggling to read the one with a Z. Is it Xana? Says it's a gateway yarn. That's absolutely true. It's like I said, it's the yarn that seems like every single person starts with, and often will go back to, but there definitely are softer acrylics. There are definitely other fiber types that you can use. So you can use wool and you can use cotton and you can use alpaca. And there are reasons to use acrylic and there are reasons to use natural fibers. And yeah, it's a very good, like I said, workhorse type of yarn.
There is no bigger one. The
No,
Jumbo,
but
it was just zoomed in the picture,
oh, okay.
but it's still always.
So there isn't just a fat Super Saver. Okay.
Doesn't look like it.
Lucy says that Red Heart Super Saver has nice colors, but does it ever soften up? Because my personal opinion is too rough. It does soften for a little while. In my experience, so it has this weird progression. If you've ever been in any secondhand store that sells secondhand blankets, you will find a blanket made of Red Heart Super Saver, and it will be crunchy. Or like squeaky. Like you'll feel it, and it won't be soft, and it won't be like squishy. But there is a point between the day you make it and the day it ends up in Goodwill, like crunchy, that in between it gets softer and nicer. That isn't to say it is soft or nice. There are softer, nicer yarns in existence, that will get softer than when they start, and they'll be much nicer and softer. But it does tend to get softer than when it started. For a little while at least. And then it seems to sort of degrade seems like a harsh word, but it does seem to not hold up to time as well as some other fibers. Let's see. CZ said I like Paintbox yarns. Paintbox, I thought was a subscription service, but maybe I'm misremembering. Oh, it looks like you get them from Lovecrafts. Is the site. Are they out of the UK? I think I just almost ordered Paintbox yarns. And the shipping, well, whatever one I almost ordered recently, they didn't take VAT tax off. Like even when I switched it to US dollars and went to check out, they never took the VAT off. And I know you can apply to get it refunded and that, and it was really way too much because it was, I want to say it was $75 worth of yarn and then almost $75 in shipping. And then when they didn't take the VAT off, it was way more yet. Or it should have gone down quite a bit. It should have been $75 a yarn and it should have gone down by like 20% or something, whatever VAT's at. But okay, they are from the UK. Yes, here in the States in... Can you read that last... Does that say Ear House? Yeah. Okay. I'm not familiar with that. Yeah. Lovecraft's at $60 is free shipping. So it must not have been them. It was a subscription service that I'm thinking of. They had this really cute set and it was on the expensive side, but it was fine.
Oh, yeah, that's not this.
It was not that. Huh?
I remember what you were talking about. It's not this.
Okay. I was thinking that was Paintbox. Oh, Warehouse in Ohio. Okay. All right, I'll have to look back into Lovecrafts and Paintbox yarns because they look pretty nice. They come in bright colors. So my husband bringing it up on the screen so I can see it since I don't have my laptop in front of me tonight. But yeah, there are a lot of different websites. Hobby is another one that I've wanted to try recently because they've got a lot of different cottons. And I recently got a loom, and so a lot of what you can weave is like nice towels, and those are better from cotton for absorbency reasons and for heat resistant reasons. You don't want to put like a hot pan on a acrylic towel or something like that because it'll just melt or get stale. Let's see, where are we at? Lovecraft has a warehouse in the US, so they ship out of the US, so that's good to know. Looks like out of Ohio. Helen's saying, did I hear your husband crochet? Wow, that's great. He does not crochet per se. He has learned to... He learned to chain when he was like a kid. I think his grandma crocheted and maybe, or his mom, your mom crocheted. And so he knows how to chain. He's done a few stitches on projects that I've worked on. But the thing that he's been most interested in recently is circular knitting. So you can get these circular knitting machines that just are a crank style machine. And you can make... Yeah, I can grab a better choice here. This is one. This is the first thing you made. And ran the whole ball. So you can just make a tube or you can make a flat panel. And you're pretty much limited to the amount of stitches that are in the ring. So you gotta be a little bit creative on how you use your stitches. Because, again, you can only make, like, you can't really make a hand warmer or anything out of this size unless you sew it. And it's about the right size for a hat. It would be the perfect size for a kid's hat. And then the little one you can make like a sock or a fingerless glove or like a preemie hat. Those are pretty much the options in sizes. So you're a little bit limited. But it goes very quickly and then you get to see how the yarn works up. So yeah, that's what he does as far as yarn crafts. And then obviously produces this live stream and any of my videos, does all my editing type stuff. So, which is not really crochet, but related to this channel. Let's see. Trying to catch up here. Love paint box. Typically get it for $1.65 a ball. Sometimes as much as it usually is $3. I missed more. Oh, what is the best yarn I've tried? And I had to walk away. Did I save a tutorial on parfait yarns? So yes, I have both a review and a tutorial on parfait yarns. It might actually be 2 tutorials. One for the blanket, one for the edging, or it might all be 1 tutorial. I'm not sure. And then Isaiah asked, what's the best yarn I've tried? And the yarn I got was tangled. How do you prevent that? So the best yarn I've tried, I have no idea. You know what your favorite is. Yours is this one.
The fiber optic for your wedding shawl was very nice, but
yeah, I do like that.
But
Twisted fiber is your favorite.
Probably the nicest, yeah.
I don't have either of those shawls down here. It doesn't look like. Man, I have a heap of yarn over here, or a heap of shawls. So the 2 that my husband's favorites, and yeah, so Twisted Fiber Arts makes a very, very nice yarn. It's sparkly and it's super soft, and I don't know, there's somewhere upstairs, but I'm not sure where. Really beautiful colors, extraordinarily expensive. On the spectrum between Red Heart and Super Saver and Twisted Fiber Arts, there are millions of different yarns from tons and tons and tons of different vendors. Really, it's hard to say what my favorite yarn is because the application for each yarn is very different. My favorite yarn for a shawl is a very different thing than my favorite yarn for a hat, which is a very different thing than my favorite yarn for amigurumi. For amigurumi, I don't want a very expensive hand-dyed wool yarn. I want basic colors in acrylic because it's tough and I know it'll look really nice sitting on a shelf and it'll be bright and vibrant. For a shawl, I want wool. I always want wool, 100% wool if I can get it. Sometimes a little bit of nylon or a little bit of cashmere, or a little bit of sparkle, but most of my fiber content, I want wool. And then from there, it really depends on the pattern. If the pattern calls for a very, very intricate design, you don't want something very, very noisy. You want kind of a plain yarn that will show off the stitches. So it's really tough to say. But yeah, the best yarn is the yarn that you can afford, the yarn that you like, the yarn that works well with the project, and is the appropriate fiber type for the application. You don't want to use a beautiful cashmere yarn for a baby blanket because it's not going to get treated right, potentially. So maybe a nice acrylic is the best yarn for that project. So it's really dependent on what you need the yarn for. So this is the Twisted Fiber Arts yarn. I don't remember what the name of this pattern is. Geometric shawl or something like that. But yeah, this is the Twisted Fiber Arts. You can see the pattern when I hold it up it's very like stair-steppy. You can't really see it when you lay it down. I sort of don't see it, but like when I hold it up, it looks very different. See? kind of an optical illusion. This is a Twisted Fiber Arts yarn. It is one of the nicest yarns I think I've ever handled. It's super, super sparkly. It's got cashmere mixed in. It's just like the softest, nicest gradient yarn. It was really expensive. So it's not in everyone's budget or the right yarn for every project. $65, I believe. But very expensive, but it was in my budget for the trip that I was on, the shopping trip that I had. And yeah, I think this one was actually one that my husband bought me for my birthday. So, and I really like the shawl that I made out of it. So, but again, it's not the appropriate yarn for every project. This is not the right yarn for a baby blanket or a rug. It would be a terrible choice for that. It's the perfect yarn for a nice shawl. So this is probably one of my favorite yarns, and yarn companies. There's tape stuck on this. This is the shawl that I made for my wedding. This is from Fiber Optic Yarns, and Fiber Optic Yarns does a really interesting thing that pretty much nobody else does. And that is you can buy a gradient. A gradient yarn is one that fades pretty much seamlessly from color to color. If you look through this shawl, you would have a really difficult time telling where the gold starts and the orange ends. And, you know, as each color fades into the next, it's very, very difficult to tell where the color changes are. If I work at it, I certainly can find them. But I would, like I said, I would really have to work at it. Like you can see here, the gold is sort of 2 rows. On this end. And on this end, it's really only 1 row. So you can see here, there's gold here, gold there, and there's gold back a row, back here. And on this side, there's gold here, but back a row, it's orange. So somewhere in here, the transition happened, but like, you wouldn't notice this while I'm wearing it, certainly. So that's a gradient yarn. Normally when you buy a gradient, you're sort of stuck to whatever size ball you buy. So if you want more yarn, you just buy a bigger gradient. And bigger gradients mean way more money. And so, you know, 100-gram gradient might be $10 or $15 more than a non-gradient version. But you know, if you want a 200-gram version, it's sometimes $40 more. Like, it's way more expensive than a 200-gram version of another thing. So anyway, what Fiber Optic Yarns offers is each end of the gradient, they offer solids of that gradient, or solids of that gradient color. So this one is called Damson to Gold. Damson is this bright blue. So the gradient actually goes from like here to here. And this section is a 100-gram ball of just Damson. And you could purchase just Damson or just gold and put one on either side. 100 grams on either side. And so what it allows you to do is make a really big pattern with a gradient on the end, giving a really cool look. And Fiber Optic Yarns is one of the only companies that I know of that does anything like that. So I really like that about them. Let's see. Let me catch up on some comments here. Oh, so you also asked about yarn that was tangled. How do you do that? And Xana replied with a ball winder as a godsend. I do have a ball winder over here, and I can show you real quick. Um, this is a Stanwood ball winder. They are sort of an upgrade type of brand. So what this does here is as you rotate this piece spins around and lays the yarn down. The cone also twists, so they're kind of moving against each other, you can see. So that it can sort of end up spinning faster, because this will make more revolutions as this turns here. And you get a really nice ball of yarn. This is on the pricier side, I think in like the $65 range or something like that. There are $14 versions from Amazon. I had a $14 one for probably 5 of the 7 years I've been crocheting, and it works just fine. And still makes a very nice ball of yarn. This one makes a bit bigger ball of yarn, so I can do, like you were talking about the Red Heart Super Saver Jumbo. On a $14 one, you certainly cannot get the whole Super Saver Jumbo into one ball. You have to cut it into a couple, and I've done that several times, where you've got to make multiple balls of the same color just because they get to a maximum size, before they just don't really work. But a ball winder is pretty straightforward as far as operation. You just thread it through and turn the crank. And just keep an eye on your yarn. You don't want yarn to get stuck in any of the mechanisms. So you can see on the side here, there's a bunch of gears. So you want to avoid keeping, or like letting your yarn get into any of your gears. And you want to avoid having it jump over the top. So you've got this going around like this, and on this particular model, you've got this thing guiding it around, and so it can't really go anywhere that you don't want it to. On the less expensive versions, this piece isn't there, and you just have the cone that spins. And so what can happen is sometimes they'll jump over the top. But the one that I had from Amazon was called like Yarn Ball Winder from House Sweetie, I think was the name of the brand. It was some sort of just like generic, probably from China brand. And I want to say it was like $14 to $16. And that's a perfectly reasonable starting option. I think Knit Picks makes some like medium priced options, like in the $30-ish range, that are supposedly a little bit nicer and might wind a slightly nicer ball. The only one that I would recommend against is Singer, I think, makes an automatic ball winder, and I have not heard a single good thing about it. It basically, instead of having to hand crank it, it just turns on its own. But it works horizontally, and from everything I've seen, it doesn't seem positive. So those are pretty much the options that I know of out there. There are crazy, ridiculous, expensive versions of automatic ones that are intended for yarn stores. And there are the cheapest of cheap options in the $10 to $14, $15 range on Amazon. And like I said, the $14, $15 ones served me pretty well.
Looks like there's an off-brand of your fancy line.
Okay, so my husband just pulled up on Amazon. There is an off-brand of this Stanwood, so a nicer ball winder with the guide that goes around it. Looked like it was prime for $47, which is I think about $20 cheaper than mine was. Mine was a birthday present, so it was something that I had on my wish list for a long time, and I got it a couple years ago. But the Stanwood is 76. Okay, I was thinking 65, but I might have just misremembered. It might have been 75. The Knit Picks is 24, and what was that?
The off-brand stand.
Oh, the off-brand. Yeah, the off-brand. So there are options everywhere between $15 and $75. And what I would suggest is if you're new to crocheting and you just want to get one, I would go on the cheap side. Maybe just choose the most expensive one that comfortably fits in your budget, with the best reviews. So if you can comfortably afford a $25 or $30 one, then do that. If you would rather just spend 15 so that you can spend 15 other dollars on yarn, do that.
You really only need it though if you're working with hanged yarns, right? 'Cause
No,
you
you can
work. I know you
yeah.
can, but you can work out of a normal ball yarn.
Yeah. So what my husband was saying is you only need it if you are working with hanked yarns, and that you have to have one. Well, actually, you don't have to even have one if you're working with hanked yarns. It just makes your life a lot easier. You have to have a Swift of some sort, even if it's a makeshift one out of the back of a chair. You have to have something to hold a hank of yarn open, so that it doesn't become a tangled mess. And for anyone who hasn't worked with it, can you chuck me a hank of yarn? They're a giant box of them. I don't have any within reach, sorry. Just any of them. Yeah, that's open, yeah. So, if you buy yarn at a yarn store, it's over here. It comes in this, like, twisted ball shape. I don't know what you call this. Like a ball of noodles here. It comes in this shape. And it looks very pretty and is entirely unusable. And so what happens is when you undo this and open it up, you get a circle of yarn. And that doesn't look so bad. And it looks very deceptive, like you could just roll this into a ball. And I promise you, if you open this up, lay it on the table like this, there's always these little ties on here that bind it together. We can zoom in on this a little bit. But there's usually somewhere between 1 and like 5 of these little ties that hold the hank together. If you cut these off, find the end and start balling this up, it will 100% tangle into a knotted mess on you. Because the thing that isn't very apparent here is that if you start pulling, sometimes when you get back around to here, the yarn is like down underneath here. And then it'll make this roll. And then this will move and the whole thing will move and shift. And it always becomes a nightmare. And so what you need is a Swift. This here is an umbrella Swift, and you'll see why they call it an umbrella Swift when I open it, because it works pretty much just like an umbrella. This is, I think, an $11 umbrella Swift from Amazon. I've been using it for like 6.5 years, I think. It works just fine. It has a pretty terrible clamp on it. It's probably would be worth investing in a slightly nicer umbrella Swift. But like I said, it works just fine. I used to have this clamp to a piece of board, just a small board. So I always open my umbrella Swift just a little bit before I use it. Loop this around, and then I hold on to one side and open the umbrella Swift just like an umbrella until it holds that tight. Now what happens is you can cut all those ties off and you can pull your yarn out and either hand ball it into a ball, or you can wind it with any sort of ball winder. But if you're not using yarn like this, you can just use a ball winder. You usually just throw the ball into a box or into a yarn bowl, into a mixing bowl, something just to keep it semi-contained. Actually, a brown paper bag works pretty well. Just keep it from rolling around the floor, and then you just set it off the side of the table, and then you can just ball up the yarn. One of the tricks, if you're not interested in investing into a ball winder, or you're not ready to yet, one of the other things you can do is work from the outside of the ball rather than the inside. So you just slide the label off and work from the other end of the yarn. It can be pretty tricky to work from the inside of the yarn, and especially on yarn that comes in the standard, this thing, whatever you call this package shape of yarn. A lot of times when you go diving into the center, what you end up with is what most people call a yarn barf, which is this chunk in the center that is just a tangled mess. It's just this horrible tangled mess, and you have to spend a while untangling it. So if you're not going to ball your yarn up, and actually I can just ball this yarn up. Show you guys how this works. Because I keep setting it on the floor, I keep angering this little yarn guide. Alright. This is not the way I normally do it, but it'll be the way that makes the most sense for, I think, the stream. Yeah, that'll do. Alright, so if we find the center in this mess, this is probably not the best yarn to do this with because it's a very, very grabby yarn, but we'll do it anyway. While I'm unballing, what have I missed here? Helen said okay, so Isaiah asked when the next live stream is. We try and live stream at 8 o'clock on Tuesday nights every week. That is dependent on, you know, what's going on, like, else, you know, whatever else is going on in, like, our lives. So sometimes we miss a week or something like that, but, if we miss, I try to let everyone know on Facebook, Instagram, and on YouTube's community tab that there will be no stream that night. And I give as much notice as I can, but sometimes that notice is actually only an hour or so. But we aim to stream at 8 o'clock Central Time on Tuesday nights. Helen wanted to know what the pattern for the wedding shawl is. That is a pattern called Big Love. That I think is a paid pattern on Ravelry. Alright. Sounds right. It should be a big white shawl. Yeah. It was a pretty good pattern. So I get kind of bored of the same thing over and over and over again throughout a shawl. If there's not a little bit of interesting stuff going on. And so this pattern was really nice because, like, a third of the shawl is one type of stitch, and then the next third is a slightly different type of stitch. And so it was interesting enough to keep me very interested. I also worked that shawl up in an absolutely insane time crunch. Because we got married in a very quick time scale compared to normal wedding planning times. Okay, so now I got through that center mush here. I can try and turn this so it's focused on that camera a little bit more. If it clears the table, it does not. Back it up a little bit.
Helen said that she had the automatic one and it didn't wind tight at all, and so she threw it away.
Okay. So Helen confirmed what I had heard before, which is that the automatic winder is actually trash. And in the case of hers, she actually threw it in the trash. So here is how the ball winder works. Unfortunately, my table is on wheels and is pretty wiggly. But it does help a lot of the time if you just keep a little bit of tension on your yarn and don't let it get too crazy. Yeah. So Copperpot was just saying that she uses a yarn baller to get rid of the yarn barf and to make nicer yarn balls. And that is what I'm showing here, is just using a yarn winder to turn a regular ball of yarn, which is usable, but sometimes you get a really tangly bad ball. Lion Brand Shawl in a Ball is known for being terrible and basically unusable out of the ball. I'm pretty sure it's why Lion Brand Shawl in a Cake exists, because Shawl in a Ball got such a bad reputation for being horrible to work with. And there are other yarns like that. Very, very tangly single ply yarns have a tendency to be notorious for turning into a tangled mess. So Lion Brand Landscapes, Red Heart, Boutique Unforgettable. So sometimes when you get to the end of a ball of yarn, you end up with this like hollow shell of yarn. This will often tangle pretty badly. Usually what I do is just like hand pull it apart here before it tangles into a giant mess. Throw all that back off the table and continue. I'm just about done with this ball. So you can see that was a 100-gram ball and it went pretty quick. The last thing that I always try and do here, so when I work a ball of yarn like this, I always work from the outside, because if you work from the center, what will happen is you'll work a portion out and then your ball will collapse if you don't have a really, really tight ball of yarn. So what I do is I always take the label, and so this was the label around this ball of yarn, and I folded it in half and in half again and in half again, till it is pretty small. And then I slide my yarn up and I shove my label inside. And so it lives in there for two reasons. One, I have a really bad habit of balling up yarn, intending to use it for a project, getting sidetracked, and not doing that project at all. And then I come back and I have a ball of yarn and I have no idea what it is. I don't know what size hook it belongs to, or like what size hook you're supposed to be using for it. I might have forgotten what color it is, whatever. And if you don't save the label in some fashion, then you don't have it anymore. If you really want to work this as a center pull cake, you could take the label and open it up and like put it around the outside and like fashion some sort of tape so that it is a label around the outside. So you might have to tape it tighter, or you might have to put like an extra piece of paper and like tape it so that it's got like a little belt. But either way, this is what a cake of yarn off of that looks like. And again, I hide my labels inside. And then I work from the outside of this ball. And you usually get a very, very nice ball off that Stanwood winder. Okay. Xana said, I find working from either hand-balled or cake to be much easier than working from a skein. Oh yeah, that's what you call that shape. Is a lot of people just call those skeins. It really helps my tension and helps my tension stay consistent. So yeah, if you pull directly off of a ball, having a nicely wound, either hand wound ball or a nice cake, one of the things you can do as far as working with a skein, you can pull a few yards off and work, and then you got to stop and pull a few more yards off. I usually do that anyway, just so that I have nice loose yarn to work with. But yeah, definitely balling up yarn, even yarn that is usable, can save a lot of headache. So even like I have some of this stuff over here. This good for you yarn is in this like flattened ball shape, and this actually you can pull from the outside or the inside. But what I've found with this shape is while it is totally usable, it almost always collapses. And collapses pretty terribly into a big old knotted mess. And so that shape yarn, even though it is theoretically usable on its own, practically it's a big headache. So yeah, if you have a yarn baller, if you're thinking about getting a yarn baller, pretty much any of the options out there are going to be fine. There definitely are nicer options in the Stanwood, and apparently there's a knockoff Stanwood, which I don't have any experience with, but looks exactly the same, and I would think theoretically functions the same. The big advantage to the more expensive ones is that you can wind much more yarn at the same time into the same ball. So if you primarily work with very heavy yarns or very large quantity yarns, like blanket, Bernat blanket, or like a whole ball of Red Heart Super Saver Jumbo, you'll get a lot more into one ball. I still don't think you'd get a whole Super Saver Jumbo into one ball, but you'd get it into less balls. Let's see, Lucy. Okay, so Lucy says I have 3 of those and I can't use them. They tangle my yarn all the time. I'm not sure if she means the Umbrella Swift or the Hanks of Yarn or the Winder. I'm not sure what we were talking about at that time. But if you want to clarify, I'd be able to see if I can give some tips. Isaiah said, thanks for all the info. You're welcome. Thank you for all the questions. It really helps the stream move along, and I get to pull out all sorts of fun tools around me. CZ wants to know the name of the yarn. I think that's the Universe from Ice Yarns. Ice Yarns doesn't have great names for their yarns. Not like, yeah, for their colorways. So the yarn is Universe, but the colorway doesn't say anything. But I'm sure once you get onto Ice Yarns, if you look at Universe, you'll find this color. It's got green and blue and teal in it. And it is a ton of halo. Lucy said she loves to watch the videos. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Also, a thank you from CZ. Isaiah asking if I can show how to do Tunisian crochet. I don't do very much Tunisian. I would consider myself a pretty much a beginner. But I could put together what I do know. I do know some Tunisian simple stitch. I've done a little bit of more complex stitches. But that would be probably more of a tutorial. When I do crochet tutorials, we set up the cameras much different. So the cameras right now are in front of me on either side. For a tutorial, I need a camera up behind me so that you can see my hands. So it's a little bit tricky to do it on a live stream. I could see if we could have something set up for another live stream so I could do more stitch tutorial type of live stream, but for right now, I could certainly show you how to cast on and do a Tunisian simple stitch in a video. The more complicated stitches we'd be sort of learning together. But yeah, we could maybe arrange for that. It might be that there is a camera on screen during a stream if we did it that way. Okay. We can possibly mount it to the ceiling. Is it the same as tapestry crochet? I don't think so. Tunisian is also known as Afghan crochet. But tapestry crochet is usually changing colors to make patterns. I think tapestry and mosaic are similar. And Tunisian and, like I said, Afghan is usually the stitches that I hear used interchangeably. Lucy says the winder is what tangles all the time. I have had problems with when I use the little winder, I would sometimes, if I wasn't holding the yarn and giving it a little bit of tension, the yarn would jump off the ball and then end up wound in the gears if I wasn't paying close enough attention to what I was doing. Sometimes if you're winding over here and you're like untangling over here, things go bad with the winder. But
it was more that the spool was too short on that cheap one. The spool is much taller on this one, so it can't go over the top.
Yeah, that is true. So one of the things that my husband just said is one of the advantages to this is that this spool is much taller. When I had the smaller one, this was much shorter. And so it was only this tall, and it was able to jump over the top because the ball was about the same height. If you remember from when I was just winding that ball, it only came up like this tall. And so there's a lot of height up here keeping it from being able to jump. I didn't think about that. That is one big advantage here, is that is so much taller. So that could be the issue. You might just be winding too big of a ball. I have seen people put a toilet paper tube over the top just to make it taller so it can't jump. That could be a possibility. Or trying to extend that tube in some fashion. I've seen all different kinds of options. There's probably a 3D printed option or something like that. There is potentially like a clay option, like maybe you could just make and mold something out of clay or something like that. But I think the simplest thing, well, two simplest things is one, to get one that's tall, and two, to maybe use a tube of some sort, like a toilet paper tube or a paper towel tube to make it taller. All right. Well, yeah, I think that's it for the night. Really good conversation tonight. Lots of good questions. Thank you all for asking and participating. It really helps the live stream move along. A lot of times when I do update tutorials where it's just questions and answers, if the audience isn't as engaged, it's harder to move the stream along. And so this was a really fun and a lot of good questions tonight. So we will try and stream again on Tuesday next week at 8:00. That's the goal. We were doing really well, and I think the last month or so we've had a couple weeks where we've missed. Isaiah says he's got one more question. I'm happy to answer it if you want to throw it in there, or again, you can always reach me at Experiments in Crafting on both Facebook and Instagram, or ask questions in the comment section on any video or after any live stream as well. But I'll stick around just a minute and see what question. What is the best yarn for a beginner? So any smooth multi-ply yarn, like, so what you wouldn't want, there's a couple things that you don't want in a yarn for a beginner. You don't want something super hairy, you don't want something super dark, and you don't want something super weak. So what you need to be able to do is have like medium to light colors that you can see your stitches really well, and that the yarn will hold up to being pulled back and like actually pull back when you pull it. So this yarn that I just held up has tons and tons of hair sticking out that we call halo. And yarns that have tons of fuzz and like, yeah. Yarns that have tons of hair like this, the halo will tend to, like, you can see here, it's got like a fuzz layer on the outside. If you have this going on a yarn, that's not a good beginner yarn. One, because it'll obscure your stitches, and two, because it tends to like knit itself together, and when you try and pull a stitch out when you make a mistake, because beginners make mistakes and want to change their tension and fix things, when you go to pull that out, it won't pull out. And it just, you can't get your stitches, and then you spend time like undoing them, and you get frustrated and you get rid of it. What you really want is, there's a good example. So this is just some acrylic yarn that I have. By comparison, if I hold them both up here, we're going to zoom back in. By comparison, you can see that there's not much red fuzz or halo. There's a little bit of fuzz. That makes it soft, but it's not tons and tons. This yarn is multiple plies, which means that there are a few different yarns in here held together. I can pick them apart like that. Oh, come down a little bit. You can see I can pick them apart. There's multiple plies there. That makes the yarn like stronger. So if you have a yarn that is single ply here, so here's just one of the plies, what happens is if you pull too hard, it will separate. There are a bunch of yarns that are just single ply. The most popular is a yarn, Red Heart Boutique Unforgettable. It's a single ply. It has tons of halo. And it just will come apart as you pull on it. So, that is not a good option for a beginner because you need to pull the stitches back. Your brother is 3 and wants to crochet. I would say 3's probably too young to crochet reliably. What you might want to look at is the Bernat. Actually, pretty much every company's got a version of this. It's a yarn with loops already in it. And it simulates knitting. But what you do is you put one loop through another loop. That might be a much easier place to have a kid that young start. So you lay down a strip of loops, and then you lay down the next strip of loops, and all you do is put one loop through every loop. Yeah, you might also look at finger crochet or finger knitting for a child that little. That's not to say a kid that young couldn't knit or crochet. It's just less likely that they have the fine motor skill to be able to do it. But I would choose probably something on the chunky side that's easier for little fingers to handle. Something like Bernat Blanket, and then try and finger crochet or finger knit with it. I don't finger crochet or finger knit, but there are tons and tons of tutorials on YouTube that should be able to get you started there. It's basically the same motions as knitting and crochet, but you just use your fingers instead of a hook. Most kids that little have struggle with the dexterity to be able to do that. Diane says, I haven't really crocheted in years and feel like a beginner. When I was a teenager, I made dresses long time ago now. I think the thing is even if it's been a very long time, it's still, the sort of the same rules apply as you get back into it. The yarns that are best are going to be the ones you can see really easily, that don't obscure your stitches, and that are strong enough to be pulled back out, and that when you pull on them, they actually come free. So you're looking for a clean-looking yarn that it is easy to see your stitches as a beginner. And then as you your skill improves, you're looking for yarns that might be darker or fuzzier or weaker that you can work with more gently. All right. Some people who crochet use light colors, like you said, acrylic yarn or cotton. Yeah, cotton is a good option too. It's strong. Cotton doesn't have as much stretch to it usually, so it can be a little bit challenging to get the tension right. But it is a good beginner option as well, especially a cotton acrylic blend. The acrylic will make up for the lack of stretch in the cotton there. All right. Well, I think we are going to wrap up for the evening, but thank you all for all of your comments and questions. If you have more comments or questions or ideas for live streams, leave those in the comment section below. And again, you can find me at Experiments in Crafting on Facebook or Instagram. And if we plan to stream at 8 p.m. on Tuesdays. That's 8 p.m. Central Time. And if we are not going to stream, there will be a notice on Facebook, Instagram, and in the community tab on YouTube. So you all have a great rest of your week and hope to see you next Tuesday at 8 Central. Have a good night. Thanks for watching.